So welcome, Perennial Pride listeners. Thanks as always. We're going to do part 2 of the 4-part series with my friend Brandon Jenkins here from Tier 1 Coaching. The first part, if you haven't listened to it, I encourage you to start there. It was about finding your why and purpose in life. I mean, this is all about reflecting internally. These are all applicable, right? But it really starts inside, and that's what we're spending a lot of time on. And Brandon is an expert in this.
Yeah, Tom, thanks for having me again. I'm having a lot of fun with this series. I really appreciate you bringing me on.
Yeah, no, and so, we talked a lot, like we mentioned purpose, and I think that's a great way to start to kind of get the ball rolling. And that isn't often really, and we talked about last time, like isn't often something we think too deeply about. We kind of can get into the rote mode of just doing stuff and not knowing why. And so once you got some clarity around that and now shape over time and you have some sort of direction, the reality in life is, and I wish it all went as smooth as possible all the time, but the reality in life, we're going to get punched. We have a plan and things change. And so today we're going to talk about building resilience. And resilience is so key in life. Sometimes we want to do so much for our children, but we may do things that actually reduce their resilience and toughness because we want to do so much for them. We care and love them so deeply that we can almost make it easy for them not to be tough and resilient. And so there's a nice balance to it. So today, and I think about resilience, and this is maybe where we can start the conversation. I mean, resilience can mean a lot of different things. And in my dictionary book here, it says the capacity to withstand or recover quickly from difficulties and challenges. Toughness. That's the definition. So from your lens, I mean, does that resonate with you? How else would you maybe further define it from your lens?
That resonates. I guess the way I would describe it most simply is the ability to one of two things, and Webster may argue with me here that maybe I'm talking about two different things. However, when I think of resilience, I think either you are trucking along and something knocks you off course, an obstacle appears and it stops you from moving forward, or you fail at something, right? And you get knocked down. And then resilience would be then the ability to then get back up and keep going, turn that obstacle into an opportunity, figure out a way around it. The other way I think of resilience, and here's where I don't know if this is, maybe I'm thinking of something different, but when I think of resilience, I think also of the ability to continue going. Maybe you didn't get totally knocked down or knocked off course, but your ability to continue going and moving forward in the direction you're meant to move. So maybe it's like one and the same, whereas like something comes at you, maybe it knocks you down for a little and you get back up. Or you could think of it as, hey, I have the ability to take these hits and I have the ability to take them, absorb them, do whatever I need to do with them and keep moving forward. To me, that's how I think of resilience.
I love it. From a picture in my mind, being a guy from Philly, my picture of it, or person or character in my life with that was Rocky, right? The movie Rocky, resilient. You just can keep fighting and you get knocked down. You keep getting back harder and stronger and pushing, and it's for the bigger vision. And like, it just never ends, right? And I guess that's kind of a journey in life that hopefully, unfortunately it does end, but, for as long as we're here, keep fighting and persisting along the way. And hopefully growing. And that's why people are hopefully here listening to help grow with this, because, unfortunately we'll be faced with a lot in our lives. Is how you handle it, right? Is your perspective.
Yeah, 100%.
So back to kind of your definition and almost slightly redefining it, because we sort of touched on this loop that's kind of generated around resilience. Can you talk a little bit where, it touches on aligning? I know we've talked about the purpose, but how does that sort of flow through to sort of a kind of like cycle of how you think about it or define it?
This resilience always reminds me of flying helicopters in the Navy. And you would go and you would train and practice and you would fly training missions and you would make mistakes. And and stuff would happen while you're flying. There might be an emergency procedure. The weather might roll in and it was not as predicted. Somebody else you're training with does something that you didn't expect them to do, outside the script, so to speak. And so you we're always having to kind of adapt to that and keep going and bounce back and get back on task, get back on mission. And a huge part of that, and I don't know, I think the loop you might be talking about is the align, act, assess, and adjust loop or cycle, you could call it. It's like a version of the learning cycle. Essentially, though, it's, we never went up in the aircraft, we never went up in a helicopter without understanding first, what is the purpose? The first place to start is understanding your purpose. Like, why are you even jumping in that helicopter right now? What are you going to do? Maybe your purpose is to jump in the helicopter and go sightseeing. Or maybe it's, no, I want to train for this tactical mission that I'm going to have to fly down the road. Right. But the point is, you don't jump in, start up, and go flying unless you know why you're doing it. And I think that's directly translatable into everyday life. Now, certain everyday things that we do consistently every single day, maybe we don't stop and consciously think every time, like, what's the purpose behind brushing my teeth? We've kind of already established that. Like, why do we brush our teeth? But when you're first learning, you're like, and you got to understand the purpose or you're never even going to start the habit. So the first part is alignment, right? Aligning with purpose and then action. All right. I know my purpose. The best way that I'm going to learn is jump in a helicopter, start it up, go flying, right? We're going to go execute that plan. We're going to go fly that mission. And that's the way that we're going to get better at it. We're going to learn from it. Now, while we're acting, we're constantly assessing, okay, are things lining up the way I thought they would before I jumped in the helicopter? The weather the way I thought it would be? Are my form partners, the helicopters flying with me, are they in the right position that I thought they would be in? Okay. The answer might be no. Okay. So now you've assessed, the answer is no, something's different. An obstacle's there, something's there that's potentially knocking you off course, knocking you down. How are you going to adjust? What are you going to do to adjust now? Maybe it's as simple as a radio call to my form partner and just tell them, hey, out of position, and that's enough for them to be like, oh crap. Okay. So then they make an adjustment. And now, okay, you're out of position. Well, there's a reason I want you in position, back to that purpose. So I tell you, you adjust. Okay. Now what's the purpose? We're going to continue on our mission, et cetera. And we can go through this cycle. So I think just having some type of framework like that helps with resilience. And I'll pause there to see if that brings up anything for you.
It's great. And to that point, I mean, we've talked about this before, and obviously because we're friends, we can chat about, we've had side conversations around these things to your point, expecting it and knowing it ahead of time. And then to your point, having a framework on how to deal with it, right? Because, stuff's going to happen. And if you just sort of can wallow in your sorrow of whatever has happened, and you never get to go through the cycle. You never learn from it. You never grow from it, right? But just knowing that and having and it's pretty simple. I know it's more difficult when you're maybe in the midst of whatever might be happening, because it could be some severe things, right? Loss of a loved one, whatever, things happen. But having at least a framework to think about it and know that these are going to happen, at least you can be somewhat prepared, right? As prepared as you can be, right? Versus having to just kind of react all of a sudden to something. Right?
Yeah.
And you may not be able to withstand it. So, I think it's a good framework, simple, and certainly resonates, especially for those who are entrepreneurs or getting into something new. You're not going to know a lot of stuff, right? You're not going to know everything. Even if you try to plan these things out perfectly, it's not going to work out that way. What's the Tyson quote, like, everyone's got a plan, so you're going to get punched in the mouth. Well, I now need to adjust. Assess the situation and adjust. This guy, different strategy, now I need to adjust. Great stuff.
There's a mindset associated with this too. There's a mindset here that you're going to fail at some stuff. Everything's not going to go the way you planned, right? You're going to come up short of a plan here and there. Like you have an idea sometimes. I think if you have a mindset, that's okay. And that when that happens, you have a framework or you have an intention to then say, okay, that's okay. What can I learn from that? What can I pull out of that? And how can I then adjust and move forward for my next experiment, for the next attempt that I'm going to make? I think that it's important to have that mindset going into it.
Yeah. Great stuff. And we're going to touch a little bit on mindset too, because I think it's really key just for like a lot of these things, our minds will, for good or bad, will drive us down different directions just because of what we're thinking and how we approach things. And I think it's so key to sort of, I joke around, it's like I have to train my brain, right? Train my mind around these things because throwing the bad stuff, it's going to turn into garbage. I got to get the good stuff in there so I can sort of have a higher chance of success. So on that note, what are some, for lack of a better term, tools in my toolkit? You know, you use that for sort of phraseology, like what are things I can draw from specifically? And some of the things that we kind of came across. One, I really like this pressure rehearsal method, that thinking. And my son plays football and they practice like crazy. It's like, feels like too much. But when the game comes, it becomes automatic, right? Type of thing. You practice and experience it so much. Could you talk about that in terms of your experience and certainly your naval experience, but even just working with business owners and your own business?
Yeah, I mean, what comes up for me right there is chair flying. So, as a helicopter pilot in the Navy, we would call it chair flying at first. If we didn't have a simulator, then we could just we could literally sit in a chair and imagine that we were in the cockpit and start to kind of just in our minds, we could have the checklist out. We could start up the aircraft. I'm going through the checklist and I'm literally imagining that I am in the cockpit and I'm flipping the switches that I need to flip. Okay. And then I can chair fly the flight. I'm flying and I imagine that I have an emergency and I can go through the motions, putting my hands where I would in the cockpit to fight the emergency. So chair flying or rehearsal, or I think you said pressure rehearsal, it's a way that work really well in aviation. And I think it's got direct applications to entrepreneurship and even in the corporate world. Like if you can do these things with your team, like chair fly that project brief that you're getting ready to give to the boss, chair fly that meeting that you're going to have with an important stakeholder. When it happens real time, your brain already has an idea of what to expect. And then when something's different, your brain automatically sees that delta. It already sees that change. And so it kind of gives you a head start on, oh, I'm going to have to change something up. I'm going to have to adjust here because as I'm assessing what's going on based on when I chair flew it, I'm assessing now and, oh, this is a little bit different. I see that delta quicker. And so I can adjust quicker. So that's how I relate pressure. If you call it a pressure rehearsal, that's how I relate it to chair flying and what I saw in aviation, what I see clients.
Yeah, I'm a big sports guy, and then my son plays sports, and you see these people who are excelling, and you just don't see that behind the scenes how much preparation it took, and that chair flying, and all the mistakes, and assessing, and all those sort of adjustments they make. Like it's kind of invisible, right, to most people, and they're like, "Oh, how did it be so good?"
Yeah.
For a lot, maybe for some people, but for most people, it's not. They had to train properly. And what was it? And certainly around leadership. And I know you do a lot of work on leadership. And I saw a quote was like, leaders don't rise to the occasion, they fall to their level of preparation. And I look at that and I'm like, wow, that's really insightful for me because I think we can easily fall prey to just doing stuff and we don't prepare and we don't practice. And, it's just, it almost can get boring. But that's, put you in the best position to succeed and be able to react properly in situations that are very stressful. You've had to work in very stressful, you're not just taking a walk in a park, right? You're in a helicopter in potentially serious situation. Like, you've got to have that experience to be able to handle it.
100%. And a direct kind of correlation to where this comes into play for a leader is rehearsing stressful situations where you know that you're normally triggered. And by triggered, I mean, those situations as a leader, when you get into them, could be a certain person in the organization and you two just don't see eye to eye. Maybe it's a peer leader, right? Across the aisle. And every time they come into the room, your hair on the back of your neck stands up. You get a tightening of the chest. Because for whatever reason, you two just don't see eye to eye on everything. And that's going to be very common as a leader. And you can, as a leader, rehearse these times. Rehearse when, hey, I think I'm going to run into so-and-so today. Or whenever so-and-so pops into the office or we're in this team meeting, I already know my default mode. I already know how I'm going to want to naturally respond to that. And so I'm going to think about that ahead of time, and I'm going to give myself something I can do to break that stimulus response cycle. I'm going to put something in the middle there to break it. And instead, maybe I'm going to take 10 breaths, or maybe I'm going to tap on the side of my leg under the table or something to remind me, hey, pause. You got a mission to do. What's your purpose? Okay. And then you can move forward with a response to whatever comes up, a response that's more intentional versus these automatic responses that we can sometimes have if we've never taken the time to rehearse or just think about, hey, how do I naturally respond in these situations? So that's another area where I think you can, as a leader especially, you can rehearse and kind of prepare yourself to be more resilient in those situations.
So I'm not going to shift gears a little bit with the tools because there's a few of them that I want to talk through. The one that's, I think most people would probably understand, like the kind of debrief, like the almost like a post-mortem type of thing, like what happened, sort of, again, doing maybe that assessment. But I also want to couple it with a different concept with the pre-mortem, right? Like doing kind of thinking through before you get into things, like really what kind of stuff could go wrong here, right? Going deep and trying to somewhat experience it.
Oh, man. Well, the pre-mortem, we would call it just a brief for the flight. And in that brief, we would do an operational risk management, operational risk assessment. So that's where we would talk about, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's the flow of the flight. Here's where we're flying to. Here's our checkpoints. Here is what we're going to do when this emergency happens. Here's what we're going to do when this emergency happens. Here's what we're going to do when we run into bad weather and we're all of a sudden we're in the clouds and we can't see each other. Here's what we would do that before every single flight. And again, that it ties very closely with what we were talking about with chair flying. It ties very closely with you're rehearsing this in your mind ahead of time so that you're priming the pump, you're priming your brain so that when you're in action and you're assessing what's going on, your brain can see that delta between what you thought was going to happen and what is actually happening in real time. And then you can make those adjustments quicker. And so in leadership or in business, it might look like sitting down with your team the night before and going over like dry rehearsal of whatever project brief you're getting ready to give. Dry rehearsal of how maybe we'll role play. Maybe as a leader, maybe I'm talking to a primary stakeholder tomorrow. Maybe I grab someone on the team the day before, 2 days before, and we just role play it. Like, hey, you're the stakeholder. I'm me. Let's go. Let's run through this conversation. Something like that. That would be akin to the pre-mortem or the flight brief or whatever you would want to call it.
And that's what no one really wants to think about these things too deeply because I don't know whether they think it's because you think about it's going to happen. Right? I think there's something like that. I think people don't want to talk about, things like death or whatever. And that's just a fact that's going to happen.
Yeah, something else. Another reason people don't do it is because it takes more time. And it's almost like I know I already have to do this. So to practice and rehearse it means that I'm doing it 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 times. And I think most people just don't want to do that because they know it's time, right? And that time's our most precious asset. And we'd rather day before, we'd rather get home to the kids and family. And I totally get that. But I think that's a big reason why some folks don't do it.
Just the other day, it was more of a business piece of advice for presenting. It was like, present till you're just bored to death. Because then you'll be like, everyone has a fear of presenting things to big audiences. Well, you've done it so many damn times, it's like brushing your teeth. You're so tough with it, it's going to come so naturally and you're prepared and kind of all goes with that. But you almost have to be bored to tears you've done it so much that it removes all the anxiety and stress around it and allows you to be tougher and deal with it and react properly with your mind at the forefront, not your emotion sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and your body gets used to, so experience is the best way to build resilience, to continually put yourself in a position where you're experiencing something, not all the way up to the catastrophe, not all the way up to the point of no return, but continually putting yourselves in these situations where there's a possibility you're going to run into some obstacles, you're going to run into some failures. And the more you do that and see that you can bounce back, you do it and see that the world didn't end. You make that presentation, you get told no, and you see that you still woke up the next day. The more you do that, you're training your mind and body. Now you believe that you can do this, fail, and still be fine. Your body has experienced that you could get into that situation. Things weren't great. Didn't turn out the way I wanted it, but I'm fine. Here I am. I bounce back. And your body then absorbs that lesson and says, okay, next time I feel like this, I know we'll be okay. Things might not go exactly as we planned, but I know we'll be okay. Your mind knows that. Your body knows that. If you never put yourself out there, though, and you never try to experience these things, and you always wait until you think you're going to be 100% success, then chances that you're building up that resilience are a lot less. You're not experiencing enough of that adversity to see that you'll be fine and that you can get up and keep going.
Yeah, no, that's a huge point. And, I reflect that certainly being a father and seeing kids, and you want them to deal with the adversity, you want them to experience it so that, to your point, they can experience it for themselves, to be able to see how they react and what, to your point, how they learn from it. And hopefully they're proud of it. They say, I can withstand these things. What else can I do? Right. And that's kind of, as an entrepreneur, father, whatever, in your careers, as you're expanding in your worlds, putting yourselves out there so you can, challenge yourself with it and see what you can take on. Right. You're going to build that toughness. And we talk about like data and using that information to sort of progress. And these are all just data points. And you almost have to try these new things out and test yourself and see kind of what happens so that you have new data points to feed in, right? To adapt and see what you can withstand, right? And what do you learn from it? So it's all part of
Yeah,
stay
100%.
heads down and sort of don't push. Yeah. And which we're going to get into a future conversation around your potential. It's going to limit it in my mind.
Yeah. Something else that I just want to double click on here again is, again, back to like why people, I think a lot of people, they just have an issue with, they don't want to fail. They don't want to try things that they don't have a 99% chance of success. They don't want to do that. And I think sometimes, maybe a lot of times, it's this tie that they have to their identity and how people see them, how they think people see them is so tied to being successful or, and not failing and having that positive result or that outcome. Just because I came up short, I didn't maybe achieve the original result or outcome I thought that I would, or that maybe my boss expected me to. Just because I didn't achieve, that doesn't mean that Jenks is a failure. That doesn't mean that Tom is a failure. I'm a whole bunch of different things other than just these, outcome and getting this successful outcome that I'm supposed to get, these results that I'm supposed to get. And I use air quotes with supposed to, because who's telling me I'm supposed to get them? That goes back to the alignment. So somewhere there's some alignment with purpose and vision and a North Star and a direction you want to travel. I get it. But man, like the minute you're able to kind of decouple, like, hey, I'm Jenks. I'm a man who believes in team. I have a growth mindset. I believe in humility. I want to empower my teammates. All those things and more go into my blueprint. And so I know that if I try something and I fail, that doesn't mean that Jinx is a failure. I'm not tied. Me and my identity are not tied to that outcome that I didn't achieve. No. And so when you have that mindset, it's like, okay, now I can learn from that and adjust. and then try something new, try something else. And if that doesn't work and that fails, okay, doesn't mean I'm a failure. Doesn't mean I lost that game, so I'm a loser. No, because my identity is not tied to that, right? I have a unique blueprint and it has nothing to do with these individual outcomes that I'm supposed to be achieving.
In this, especially societal pressures, be what they are, I think we could get caught in that very easily, almost impossible unless you sort of try to ignore it. And I've tried to do that in a lot of cases personally. I try to remove myself from those sorts of spheres. It doesn't, to your point, impact what I think about myself and my identity and who I am. But it also, what I would encourage people, and it's helped me personally, is having a little more to yourself compassion for yourself around your identity, your worth and value, and having compassion when you may not have gotten to that result you wanted, right? But you pushed and you learned, and now it's going to build over time. But you can get wrapped up in the identity and what it looks like on the surface and to others. But, having compassion for yourself, like you're on a journey here to grow and learn and become better. And that's just
Percent.
part of the road we take, right? And be okay with it. So with this road we're on in the journey, they asked one of the last pieces in the toolkit, which I wanted you to share a little bit more about, is your leadership ready rooms and being able to be around other like-minded people to help you, like peers, others in your world to kind of work together, right? Because this can be very lonely, especially in the entrepreneurial space, right? There's a lot of solopreneurs out there. And so how do we help each other grow and become more resilient? So can you talk more about that and what you're doing and what your experience has been around that?
Yeah. Being in the right room means, in this context, means getting around other peers, other leaders, other entrepreneurs in your space, out of your space, just getting around other perspectives and people who can help you see things from different angles, which then when you are acting and you are trying new things, you are able to kind of anticipate some of these other obstacles that may or may not come into play because you were in the right room. You were able to talk to someone else prior to, or even maybe during, maybe this is a project you're working on or something, some big change you want to make in the business. And so maybe you're bringing different challenges through different stages of this change or this implementation to the right room, to these peers, to these other people that are in your group. And you, along the way, are getting different perspectives. Maybe they're asking you some great questions that help you kind of tease out some things that maybe you weren't even thinking about before. The value in that is hard to quantify. I mean, I've been in a group like that for 6 years. I was in that group when I was second in command of the squadron, through my command tour at that squadron of 300 plus people, through changing completely from being the commanding officer of a helicopter squadron to then being a graduate school student and then a professor of leader development, completely different worlds, and then to getting out of the Navy and retiring and that major life transition. All along the way, I have had that group, and I cannot overstate how impactful and beneficial that has been to allow me to keep taking these transitions, taking these changes, keep going. I mean, we're talking resilience. Like, man, being in the right room has really helped me with my resilience and being able to just keep going through all of these changes and thriving to me. And thriving is personally defined. I think you need to define thriving for yourself and not worry about what societal definitions of success and thriving are. And I can tell you that being in the right room has helped me to thrive through these transitions over the past 6 years or so and beyond, man. But if you don't have a formal room, you likely have colleagues, you likely have industry peers who might not be in your same job, but you know that maybe you can go outside the job and talk to them. So I can't stress enough how valuable getting in the right room is for this.
And it takes being humble and open, right? And sometimes vulnerable, right? Because to your point, we want everyone to again, this is just pressures broadly speaking. I feel like we've got it all sorted, right? The reality is, especially for a lot of people getting to new spaces, starting a new business, or even in business that's transitioning, that you may not have it all solved yet or have all the right answers. And, getting around others who can appreciate that and are essentially looking out for your best interest too and helping guide you, I think is so valuable because we only can see what we've experienced and learned through our own worlds. And, there's so many other things that people have seen differently. And like we talk about, you can read a book and we're going to take different things from it based on our experiences.
100%. Yep.
They're so valuable because, and it tests out how you're thinking about it. And maybe someone else has a different level that, it's better for you given where you're trying to go. So just being open to that is really huge. And it just brings energy.
At the basic level, just knowing that you're not alone and you have another group of folks who get it, even if they just listen and you unload on them, there's a lot of value in that. There's a lot. And in my weekly meetings in my group, I have done that before where I just unloaded. I didn't expect anyone to help me solve anything, but I just needed to unload somewhere and they were listening and I knew that they got it.
Yep. So we touched on the last part of this phase and we covered quite a bit around tools and things we could do. And I do want to touch a little bit. I know we already, in some respects, talked about throughout the course of this discussion is mindset. And I've grown over being blessed to be on this earth for as long as I have is to recognize how important that is. Having the right mindset and really continuing to develop it and reinforce it over time. And so I want to just touch on a few different mindsets. I think, for those who are looking to build their resilience can really think through and hopefully adopt. The first one I want to talk about is what we call like own the controllable, right? There's so many things that we think about. I forgot what that, stat was like, whatever, 1,000,000 thoughts that run through your head during a day, right? A lot. And some of them we can control or we can't, like the outcomes or what's going to happen. But, the concept of focusing on what you can control, right? Really doing that, I think is so important. I've really stressed it. To talk from your lens, kind of where that's helped you or where you've experienced that to be a really helpful tool for others.
A lot of the folks that I work with in my coaching, they are successful, they're high achievers, and they actually believe that they have a lot more control than they might have. And I think that is a natural result of just having achieved a lot, been successful in everything you've done. And you look back and you say, man, these are the steps I took and look where I'm at. And it's very easy to associate the outcome with all of the things that you did and that they directly led to that outcome. And I think, Tom, we control a whole lot less than we think. I believe that, in fact, I don't think we control outcomes. I think that we influence them with the action we're taking, which is why it's so important to take aligned action, to have a vision, know your purpose, know which direction you want to roll, and then take action that's aligned. And that's going to influence whether or not you achieve whatever it is you're trying to set out and achieve. But we don't control it because there's way too many external factors that could come into play and just knock you off track, right? So what I believe we control, and maybe I'm going to miss something here, but I've pretty much just boiled it down to, I believe we control our actions to a point, our response. So there's sometimes when something happens and we instinctually want to react to it and we just react, right? And so I think we control our response. I also think that we actually need to train ourselves to be better at controlling our response. Outside of our actions and our responses, I don't even think we control our thoughts. Now, somebody may challenge me on that, but if you've ever tried to just sit for 5 minutes and be mindful and just focus on your breath and nothing else, how quickly does a thought just pop into your mind? There may be a level of person out there who actually does have more control over the thoughts than I do. For me, it's like I control my actions, my responses to what other things going around me are doing, like what's happening. And outside of that, I don't know. I don't know how much else I control. And so where the resilience piece comes in and the mindset comes in is I recognize that. And so when things are going on around me and they're completely, this seems like crazy, there's uncertainty, there's volatility out there, things aren't going the way I thought they would. I don't hold on to this idea that I control the end state. I just have come to realize, okay, I control my actions and my response. So what's something I can do right now that will help me, that will influence where we're going to end up? Because I don't control exactly what's going on out there, but I control me, my actions, my response. And so I think adopting that mindset has helped me, man, especially in the last like 5 to 10 years. I don't know. I'm sure every 5 to 10 years, somebody says, in the last 5 to 10 years, it's been really crazy. However, I feel it. I just feel like volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and adopting this mindset. It's a practice. It's not easy to do. And I fail at it all the time. However, I'm getting better at just, hey, what about this do I actually control? Actions, response. Okay. Which way do I want to go? And what do I need to do to influence me getting there? And if I stick to that, it's helped me tremendously.
No, that's wonderful. Yeah, and it's, and to your point, I agree with you. The thoughts will fly through whether I'm thinking about them or not. It just kind of happens. It's to your point. You just hopefully over time with some of these sorts of exercises and ways of thinking, you can address them in a more positive way, right? As opposed to I used to remember days when I would something negative would happen. It was you just literally dwell on that thing. It could be for days or weeks, serving no purpose, and just occupying your brain. Versus to your point, like, what can I do with this? What are some actions I can take because of this, right? That I can control. And it's really a powerful tool if you can do it. But to your point, the reinforcement, like you're getting better at it. I can react faster. I can, shake it a little bit faster when you get into little funks, which we all do, right? That's just reality. We're humans. But, getting back to the heart of it, like what can I really control at the end of it? And I'm similar to you. I think of things like attitude, right? And what I call attitude and effort, right? And similar in actions, like effort. I can give effort or not, right? I think I can control that. And a lot of it probably spurs from the attitude I have around it.
Great point. Yes.
Right? And I try to just train my brain around positive attitude around it. So I can at least think about it in a positive light and then, to your point, do something. Whether get it off my plate and ignore it and move on or actually do something and change, right? And call somebody or do whatever, right? It's really powerful. And then just remove some of the cloudiness and stress, I think. The only last one from a mindset, and I think this is for folks who are entrepreneurs or you're just working crazy jobs in life. So like you feel like you're running 100 miles an hour, like all the time. What I've come to realize for a lot of folks, and certainly it's helped me, is the need to sort of take these little resets or recovery periods, right? Because we can just work endlessly and all the time. And, you hear these things, the people at the end of their lives, like no one's ever said, hey, I wish I worked more, right? And so I've found having the ability to have these little mini recoveries and allows me to go harder when I am working, right? Be able to deal with more in those potentially stressful moments. So I wonder any sort of thoughts from your end around these little small resets or sort of recovery periods that maybe help you maintain and deal with, stress and be able to recover faster.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, you said it. Like, I believe that you have to program in time to recharge. And so it's a very personal thing. Like, what do you like to do to recharge so that you can then come back fully charged and ready to go? And so that's going to be highly individualized. What I do believe is that there is a strong tie between the physical and the mental and the ability to continue to bounce back. I just believe that they're linked. And so I would say, man, I used to say this in my command, right? When I was a commanding officer, one of the big things that I would try to kind of hammer home was just to do something physical every day, whether it's take a walk, whether it's lift weights, move your body, and then find time to do something, learn something each day. It could be tiny. We at the dinner table too, we sit down each night, we say, hey, what are you grateful for today? And what's something that you learned today? And sometimes it's not like we have some huge revelations every day, but I think what it does is it just reminds us, hey, be grateful. We can always be learning. And the movement piece, it's like we can always be in movement and ready for when we're going to need our bodies down the road. And so doing something to stay active so that you stay, because we talk about resilience, getting old. We talk about the ability to have an injury and bounce back, the ability to get sick and bounce back and live a life that you want to live up until the day you die. Hopefully you don't have 10 years of being bedridden or not being able to do the things that you really want to do in that last decade of life. And so those are kind of the things for me. And I will say, I would throw in mindfulness now too. For me personally, I have seen a steady, consistent mindfulness practice show up in my own life and help me in many different ways. Specifically, we've talked about a couple today, but the ability to pause between a stimulus and a response, the ability to be present and focused with whoever it is you're talking to, your teammate. They're coming to you. They've got issues going on. You've got an issue or a challenge, a crisis, something comes to your attention. Do you have the ability to set everything to the side, pause, and be completely present with somebody? Goes a long way for my resilience. And I'd be surprised if it didn't help some other of your listeners out there too, Tom.
Listen, we've covered quite a bit of ground from, defining what resilience is and kind of a framework to think about it, some tools in the toolkit you can use to hopefully build that, and certainly ways to maybe enhance your mindset around it so you can become more resilient. Hopefully go have a listen to this a couple of times and see if there's at least one or two things you could start incorporating or thinking about, incorporating into your lives to help sort of build this along the way. So, Brandon, as always, really appreciate your wisdom and experience and thoughts around this. We're going to go now into part 3 of this, which is next. Now you've set the vision, you've refined your purpose, you're sort of building your resilience to handle the hard things, right? And push forward. The next topic is going to be around unleashing your potential. We all have unique skills and values and things that we contribute. How do you unleash that potential so you can maximize that for yourselves, for your families, and for those around you? So, Brandon, thanks as always for joining me and sharing all that great stuff. And, any parting words as we leave this episode on resilience?
Tom, I just want to leave everybody with, actually to you, thank you for having me on again. I'm looking forward to the next episode, when you and I get on here and do it again.
Thanks for joining me on this episode today. I really am grateful for you as listeners to the Perennial Pride podcast. I hope you're getting some tremendous value out of it and hopefully pushing you along your journey to financial freedom. I put this podcast together really to help you get more educated around your finances so that you feel empowered to live the life that you really want. And if you like the content that you heard today or watched, then I would encourage you to go to my website, perennialpride.com. There's tons of other content there. And you can access my book, Wealth Beyond the Numbers. You can buy it there on my website. It's a aggregation of a lot of great tips and tools I've learned to not only build my wealth in my accounts, but build wealth in my life and abundance and joy, and something that has a lot of my experiences in the journey that I've been on personally. Hopefully that can be also of value to you as you sort of move forward. So thanks again for being a Perennial Pride listener, and we'll see you on the next episode.